All right, Hapaday and hello and aloha, everybody. Welcome to the Knauss Fellowship Information Webinar presented by the University of Hawaii and the University of Guam Sea Grant programs. My name is Kyle Mandapad, coming to you live here from beautiful Manila, Guam. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon or this morning, depending on which beach you're closest to. Today, we're all here because we want to get you some information. More information about an amazing opportunity that is within your grasp. More information about an awesome program that can change your life, and more information about the Knauss Fellowship here with Sea Grant. Today, we're going to be going over some of the specifics of the application process. We're going to get you some tips, some tricks, and we're going to talk with three people who have done it before, representing, of course, both Guam and Hawaii for unprecedented access for all of our potential applicants. Now, being a Knauss Fellow puts you front and center in Washington, D.C., at the heart of policymaking. Here to open things up for us, someone who knows a thing or two about policymaking. Please welcome a member of the 36th Guam Legislature, the Honorable Senator Amanda Shelton.
Hapaday, I'm Senator Amanda Shelton of the 36th Guam Legislature. It's my honor to welcome you to this interactive information webinar for students interested in applying for the 2023 John A. Knauss Marine Policy Fellowship. First, I'd like to recognize and thank Dr. Darren Leonard, Director, and Dr. Beth Lenz, Assistant Director of the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College Program, who I had the pleasure of meeting here at the Guam Legislature just a few months ago, and Dr. Austin Shelton, Director, and Frank Castro, Associate Director of the University of Guam Sea Grant Program, for the opportunity to join you all today. As the Legislative Chairwoman of the Committee on the Advancement of Youth and Higher Education, I'm so excited that this Sea Grant Knauss Fellowship is being extended to interested students here on Guam. The Knauss Fellowship represents an excellent opportunity to live and work in the nation's capital and be a part of the national policy discussion of protecting our natural resources. We here on Guam and throughout Micronesia and the Pacific offer a unique perspective at the forefront of climate crisis, preparing and responding in real time to the challenges we face in warming sea temperatures, extreme weather, rising sea levels, coral bleaching, and marine habitat loss. And we have so much to learn from the vast network the Knauss Fellowship will open up to you. This opportunity will allow you training and mentorship while building connections and expanding your professional network. But most importantly, it will help you to elevate Guam's issues using a highly sought after, prestigious platform. And the experience you gain and bring back will be invaluable to us here at home. We are so proud of Guam's very first Knauss Fellow, Lauren Swaddell, who is using her expertise and experience serving here at the University of Guam. My colleagues and I here in the legislature will be eagerly awaiting what you have to share to translate your work and research into effective policy initiatives to build a stronger, more resilient island community in the face of climate change. You've already followed your passion and taken this step, so I encourage all of you to fill out those application packets and take advantage of this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We need you as our next Knauss Fellow representing Guam in Washington, D.C. I wish you all the best. Siduos Ma'asi.
Thank you very much for that, Senator. And you know, I think that being on Guam and Hawaii, there's an ocean that divides us from the rest of the continental US. But with technology and with your amazing brains, I think that we're going to be able to bridge that gap and that distance like never before. As the Senator mentioned, bringing back the knowledge and experience from Washington, D.C. to your home islands on Guam or in Hawaii, definitely going to make a huge, huge impact. Now, speaking of impact, making an impact definitely has to start somewhere, and I can't think of a better place to start than with an application. Ladies and gentlemen, here to take us through the application process, please welcome someone who is very well versed in affecting change from the University of Hawaii. Please welcome Ms. Maya Waldman.
Thanks, Kyle. Before we get into the nuts and bolts of the application process, people were calling it the coconuts and bolts yesterday, which I appreciate that pun. We wanted to get a sense of who's in the Zoom room with us today. So what I'd like for you to do, you can do this on a smartphone or in another window on your laptop or your computer. Please head to menti.com, www.menti.com. And when you get there, please enter this code 67705603. The first question that we're going to answer together is, what is your research focus or area of interest in graduate school? If you're an undergraduate student, welcome. We'd love to know what you're majoring in. We're just trying to get a sense of what people are studying, what you're interested in. So please head to menti.com and enter this code again. It's 67705603. And we'll know how many people have responded to the poll. There's a number in the lower right that shows me 2 people have sent in responses. So it looks like we have some students who are interested in watershed restoration, environmental law. Keep the answers coming. Marine biology, urban planning. It's really exciting because we have a mix of students from both Hawaii and Guam today. So I'm really excited to get to know this group together. Okay, so we have a couple of marine biology students, some folks from law, some folks from planning, marine microbiology, disaster resilience. I'll give a couple more seconds before we move to this next question. Okay, I'm gonna forward us to the next question here. So the second question is, do you have any questions about the Knauss Fellowship? I noticed a couple folks have been with informational webinars with us last year in late 2021. Maybe you've come up with new questions since the last time we've had a chance to talk to you. Do you have any questions about the fellowship, applying? What is it like to live in DC? What is it like to be a fellow living and working in Washington, DC? What kinds of questions do you still have about the fellowship?
I actually have a question. Hi, Maya.
Hi, Sequoia.
For the application process, how could you please go over how that is operated? I know you explained from the last discussion that you guys had with the just University of Hawaii and Manoa campus students. But yeah, if you could please go over that again.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we'll definitely get to that when we get to the PowerPoint slides. So Sequoia has a great question regarding process. How many times can a fellow apply? Has it changed since the pandemic? How many positions are available? What is the application process like from program to national level? These are great questions. If you have other questions, feel free to put them in the chat as we go along, but this is a great way for us to capture some initial questions. And the last question for this group is, what do you imagine doing after graduate school? So some acceptable answers are, I'd like to get my PhD. I'd like to become a Knauss Fellow. I'm still thinking about it, but I'm not sure. I want to work at the intersection of science and policy. I want to work for the state legislature. Lots of potential answers here. Oh, here's a good one. Working per Sea Grant. Good answer. Great answer. Keep them coming. I'd like to use my degree for my island. I like that a lot. And I'll wait a couple more seconds for answers to trickle in here. Okay, engage in marine science research and communication. Great. I'm going to close the Menti now. Oh my gosh, was I not sharing my screen this whole time? That's funny. All right, well, this time I am gonna get it right. I'm gonna share my screen and show you the PowerPoint slides. Thanks everyone for being so kind. Let's make sure that you can see my screen this time. Can you see my slides?
Looks good.
Great, excellent. So the plan for today is to go through the application process. I know many of you have seen a version of the information we're about to share before. So hopefully you're coming in with new eyes, new perspective. We are in a new year, 2022. So maybe this deepens your thinking about the kinds of things you would like to put into your application or the kinds of questions that you have before the deadline. But we really appreciate everyone who's made time to come and learn more about the fellowship process with us today. Okay. This is a really important part about the fellowship. You'll notice that we have individuals who work for the University of Hawaii Sea Grant College program. We also have individuals who work for University of Guam Sea Grant. The Knauss Fellowship is administered through Sea Grant programs across the country. There are 34 of these programs. So what's happening in February of this year is at the local level, these Sea Grant programs are soliciting and accepting applications from students. Those applications get reviewed at the local level, and each Sea Grant program is allowed to send 6 of those local applications to the national pool. And we're going to talk about timeline and process later on in the presentation today. But I want you to know that Sea Grant, one of our focal areas is in developing this next generation of marine science professionals, marine scientists. And one of the ways that we are helping to develop this next generation of amazing people is through fellowships like the Knauss Fellowship. Okay. So some of the nuts and bolts of this fellowship, it is a year-long fellowship in Washington, D.C. If you are selected as a fellow, you are expected to move there. For people turning applications in February 18th, 2022, the fellowship starts February of 2023 and goes all the way till January of 2024. The great news is they have increased the stipend. So Knauss Fellows next year will be getting paid $66,500 over the course of the year. And you also have access to $5,000 for what they're calling allowable expenses. These are funds that you can use to further yourself professionally and academically. So you can use these funds to attend conferences that you're interested in, perhaps to fly somewhere and set up informational interviews so that you can make the jump to this next step in your career or in your academic progress. Applications are due February 18th, 2022. And one thing to keep in mind is it takes 1 year for the applications to get reviewed, vetted, for the selection to take place. So if you are interested in starting next year, say for example, you have a graduation in May of 2022 or in December of 2022, now is the time to apply. And then there's like a full 12 months of waiting to find out what happened to my application. So timeline is a part of it, and we want you to think ahead. If you're getting close to graduation, this February deadline is the time to get your stuff in. There are 2 flavors of fellowship. Later on in the panel, we have people who can speak to both sides. Legislative fellows work on Capitol Hill in the offices of senators, congresspeople, on committees. Beth Lenz is going to talk about her experience as a legislative fellow. And then there are executive fellows. Both Lauren and I served as executive fellows during our years Knauss Fellows. Executive fellows, they work in federal agencies, places like NOAA or the National Science Foundation, the Department of the Interior, various federal agencies that are part of the Knauss Fellowship. I wanted to give you some concrete examples of where Knauss Fellows have been placed in the past. So for example, we have had folks head to US Senator Brian Schatz's office, or another example of a Knauss Fellowship placement might be the International Affairs Fellow with NOAA Office of International Affairs. So lots of different examples of where you can end up. And a question that we get a lot is, does my research background have to be a 1-to-1 match with my host office? And I would say in most cases, it's probably not a direct match. The fellowship is really meant to push you outside of your comfort zone. Hopefully you have some projects that tap into your research experience and your own background, but you're probably going to get a lot of new projects and you'll have to look at topics that you're unfamiliar with. For students who are interested in careers at NOAA, the Knauss Fellowship is a great way to get your foot in the door. These are some survey results from the alumni that they pulled. And you'll see here of the 1,000 or so alumni that they surveyed, 30% ended up in jobs at NOAA after the fellowship. So if this is something that you'd like to do long-term, it's a great way to try out what working at NOAA is like for a year, and it might help you land that long-term full-time job that you've always dreamed of at NOAA. So keep that in mind. Here's another question that we get a lot. My graduate degree is not in marine policy. Can I still apply? And the answer is absolutely yes. We have seen successful applicants from natural resources and environmental management, marine biology, oceanography, urban planning. What students have to demonstrate is an interest in marine policy, but they don't necessarily need to be majoring in marine policy or pursuing a degree in marine policy. So you just have to show that you're interested in gaining this experience through the fellowship. I think we have a mix of students today, master's students, perhaps some PhD students. I also quickly wanted to mention that the fellowship is also open to law students, people who will be earning a JD. And again, the deadline's coming up. Applications are due February 18th, 2022 to either the Hawaii Sea Grant office or Guam Sea Grant. And we ask that you be in touch with your respective Sea Grant programs so that we can connect you with alumni, set you up with the resources to put the very best version of your application together. For students from Guam, the way you will submit your application materials is through email. So please email seagrant@uog.edu. Here's a subject line that you're going to include 2023 Knauss Fellowship. So this is simply going to be an email attachment that you send to this address. And we'll give everyone a copy of the slides so that you remember where to send it to, what the subject line should say. So this is a reminder for Guam students how the application should be submitted. For Hawaii students, you will need to submit through eProjects. I think I've had a chance to talk to most of you about that. And the very first thing I would do if you are a student based in Hawaii is set up a username, set up a password, and we ask you to identify your letter writers as soon as you can so we can get those instructions out to your letter writers. And eProjects is stitching things up behind the scenes and connecting your letters to the application materials that you submit. Let's talk about the things that you're going to write and put together and submit. The format of the application has changed quite a bit this year. I actually think it's to the benefit of the students. They have some really targeted questions that they're asking instead of an open-ended 1,000-word essay. So students will need to put together a 2-page CV, answers to the questions that the National Sea Grant Office has prepared and listed for you. 1 page describing your relevant coursework and future year plans. You'll need 2 letters, but those are going to get submitted directly by the letter writers. Unofficial copies of your transcript. This is not applicable to anyone here with us today, so I'm not going to talk about that. And then eventually, if you're one of the 6 that the local Sea Grant office decides to send to the national pool, there's a director letter that gets included in your package. We'll be sending out some resources that delineate the review criteria and how these points are assigned, but I wanted to give you a quick overview of where points are going in your application package. You'll notice that 55 points go to answering the questions that the National Sea Grant Office wants you to talk about. So if I was thinking about where to focus my energies, I would focus on this personal education and career development response. It's a lot of points, 55 points. 10 points is going to the CV, 10 points to this 1 page describing your future year plans, 15 points collectively to the letters, and then 10 points to the overall application. So again, with 55 points going to these answers, for the questions that they've listed, please focus your energy there. You are eligible to apply if you're completing a graduate degree in the United States, and if you have an interest in ocean and coastal resources and the national policy decisions affecting those resources. If you have any additional questions about eligibility, you can come and find one of us and talk to us offline. We're happy to go back and forth with you on that. Some important dates to remember. February 18th, 2022 is when we need all of the application materials. Guam students, please send it via email to that address we showed earlier. Hawaii students, you're going to submit to e-projects. By April, we will be nominating 6 of the applications to send to the national pool. In general, there's about 200 applications that they review at the national level. And in May, when they pull the review panel together, they're going to take the list of 200 applications and cut it down to something like 60 to 70 applications. So those are your odds if you're moving from the local level to the national level and past the national review panel. Generally, by June or July, we're able to notify students if they've been selected as what we call Knauss finalists. And in the fall, between the months of October and January, those finalists will complete something that we call Placement Week. It's a series of interviews so that you get matched with a host office. And the fellowship begins February 1st, 2023. Some quick tips and tricks. Please be in touch with us early. We can help to connect you with alumni who can talk to you about how they have structured a successful application package. They might even be willing to share those materials with you so that you can read through and get a sense of what's worked in the past. Please provide materials to your letter writers. Talk to them about what the Knauss Fellowship aims to do. Talk to them about why you're a good fit. Maybe you provide those items in a bullet list so that they have some content to work with as they're crafting their letter for you. And please tell a story of what you hope to gain from the fellowship, but also the skills and experiences that you're bringing to the fellowship. I really appreciated what Amanda Shelton said in her opening remarks. This is truly an opportunity to elevate some of the issues and the questions that you care about at the local level, the things that are happening in Guam, the things that are happening in Hawaii that you want people in Washington, D.C. to know about. Try to tell some of that story perhaps in your application materials or in your interview. I think students from island communities have a really, really important perspective to share in a Washington, D.C. context. And the last tip is review all of your written materials. You want the most polished version to be turned in. I'm going to hand the mic back to Kyle, and he's going to help us transition to this next section.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Maya. Again, great tips, great tricks, and a whole lot of information that we could hopefully all use to get closer to the fellowship. As we've mentioned throughout the entire beginning of this presentation, now we're going to jump into a special panel. I know that there's so much information that you can take in via presentations and your own research, but it's time to hear from people who have been there before. The next 3 people that I'm going to introduce again have all successfully completed their fellowships across various different platforms. And as we mentioned, you're going to learn a lot more about that as we get into it here. Introducing first, we just heard from her representing Hawaii Sea Grant, the 2014 Knauss Fellow, or 2014 Knauss Fellow, I should say. She served in the executive branch, as we mentioned earlier. At NOAA, please welcome Ms. Maya Walton. Also joining us from Guam Sea Grant. She is the first Sea Grant Knauss Fellow from our island, and that happened back in 2019. She also worked with NOAA in the executive branch of the Coral Reef Conservation Program, Ms. Lauren Swedell. And rounding out our panel this morning or this afternoon, also representing Hawaii Sea Grant, she's the 2020 Knauss Fellow, Legislative Branch with the U.S. House of Representatives, Natural Resources Committee. Ms. Beth Lenz joins us as well. Hafa and welcome. Aloha, ladies.
Okay, each of us has prepared some photos that show some of our experiences from Washington, D.C., because we wanted to make it a little bit more concrete for students. And sometimes pictures help to illustrate whatever experiences have been like. Okay, so here I wanted to show you guys actually what living in DC can look like. These are some photos of the street that I lived on. I was really impressed this one day when we got a lot of snow and I took a picture in front of the apartment that I lived in Columbia Heights in Washington, DC. This is the cohort of Knauss Fellows that I was with in 2014. I worked as an executive fellow for the Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. And part of the fellowship experience is getting to know other Knauss Fellows who are working in other offices. You learn a lot from talking to them about their projects, and it's a really exciting time. You make a lot of new friends, friends that you'll stay in touch with for many, many years. And then the third thing I wanted to mention here is during my year as a Knauss Fellow, we got to go on special field trips. So this photo in the lower right is a field trip that we took to the Smithsonian collections. These are vertebrae from a whale skeleton. So we got to go behind the scenes and look at the specimens that they keep, the collections that they keep. And this photo second from the right is the library at the Oceanographer of the Navy. This is the same property that the vice president has a house and lives at. And this is the beautiful library that's part of the Oceanographer of the Navy property. An example of a project I worked on as a Knauss Fellow. At the time, Hokulea was going on its worldwide voyage, and NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuary partnered with the Polynesian Voyaging Society to put together an outreach magazine. So this was a wonderful way for me to learn about science communication work. It was the first time I had ever worked with graphic designers, science writers, participating in meetings where a nonprofit like the Polynesian Voyaging Society is in conversation with a federal agency like NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries. So this was a concrete work product that I was able to walk away with at the end of my fellowship year. And then another example of something I got to do, the year I was a Knauss Fellow, NOAA's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries was partnering with a group called Catlin XL, and they were going to locations around the world and using underwater scooters with 360-degree cameras to create these 360-degree underwater viewscapes that you could look at through Google Earth. So here's an example of some imagery that they collected in the Florida Keys National Marine Sanctuary using this technology. And part of my fellowship, I spent learning how to use underwater scooters. And we actually got to go to Florida and we took the pictures and we came back to Washington, DC. There was a separate team that stitched everything together and made these beautiful 360-degree images. And I wrote a blog post. So that was another concrete work product coming out of my Knauss Fellowship year. I'm going to hand it over to Lauren.
Hi, Hafa everyone. I'm Lauren. Here's a little bit about me. I'm from Guam. I grew up here and I'm of Chamorro descent. I got my bachelor's in environmental studies at Hunter College in New York City. And then I got my master's in environmental science at the University of Guam, where I focused on watershed restoration using native plant species in high slope terrains with severely eroded soils. I saw myself on Guam for the remainder of my career. So when my advisor first told me about the Knauss Fellowship, I honestly didn't want to do it. It took me months of just like having it on the back of my mind. And then I said, you know what, it's just a year. I could come back home. And in the meantime, I'll learn what the federal system that manages our resources and creates policy is like. So I could bring that knowledge back home to Guam and have that understanding in the work that I do. So I did it. I became the first Knauss Fellow from Guam, 2019 Knauss Fellow Executive Fellow in the NOAA Coral Reef Conservation Program. So the image on the bottom left, those are my mentors on the left in the coral program, and the folks on the right, that's Austin Shelton and Fran Castro from Guam Sea Grant. So it was nice they got to visit me in my DC office. And actually my fellowship position prepared me for my current role and my current job that I have as the Guam Green Growth Coordinator back here on Guam at the University of Guam Center for Island Sustainability. And after 2 years of working there, I've taken a position back in DC with the Pew Charitable Trust in their International Conservation Unit, where I have the chance to use my current skill set in a similar way and expand my experience. And honestly, it was my connections that I made in DC that helped me see myself going back and learn about these job opportunities there. So Maya, if you don't mind going to the next slide. Oh, yes. So what my year was like as a Knauss Fellow, my main responsibility was planning the 41st and 42nd US Coral Reef Task Force meetings. The first one was in DC and the second one was in Palau. So yes, I got to go to Palau and work with other islanders on planning that meeting. Through that planning, I worked with 13 federal agencies, 7 states and territories, and 3 freely associated states, and 4 NOAA line offices. So I got like this amazing immersive experience on like all levels of government and how different agencies work and how different states work in managing a resource that I knew something about but didn't know too in-depthly. So that was a great immersive experience. I also commissioned and coordinated a bibliography, which was developed by the NOAA Library on sunscreen impacts on corals and other aquatic ecosystems. I planned and organized a learning network exchange, which was co-organized with the World Bank. And it was for our coral program partners internationally, as well as capacity building technical experts. I also worked on the social media for the coral program, and I helped write and develop policy briefings, position statements, and collaborate with other agencies whose jurisdictions touched coral in some way. Okay, last slide. Some things that I got to do outside of like my typical work responsibilities was I got to give a presentation to the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy Director, Dr. Kelvin Drogemeyer, using science on the sphere to describe my Knauss Fellowship experience, my own personal research experience. And afterwards, we got to put the Death Star on the Science on the Sphere, which is super fun. I also got to do a career day at a local elementary school to tell the students what my work was like and why corals were important. And like Maya mentioned, we got to do a bunch of field trips. The image on the left bottom is a giant mantis shrimp, which was found in the Marianas Trench near Guam. So I thought that was super cool. And, like we would get to go to a bunch of receptions where we got to meet zoo animals and go to movie screenings, seminars, conferences, and a bunch of social networking events. And of course, we also had the chance to do all sorts of professional development training, like media and communications, diversity and inclusion, a bunch of NOAA web-based programs because I was based in NOAA, and so much more. So it's hard to sum it all up in 5 minutes, but it was very exciting and I'm so happy I did it. Okay, and now I'll turn it over to Beth.
Thank you, Lauren. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Hi, my name is Beth Lenz and I work for Hawaii Sea Grant now. And in 2020, I was a legislative fellow working for the Natural Resources Committee in the US House of Representatives. And I worked in a subcommittee focused on water, oceans, and wildlife. Next slide. And so during my experience, 2020, I only had a month and a half physically in office. And it was awesome to be able to work at the Capitol, to be able to commute there. I had free parking at the Capitol. It was amazing. Love their cafeteria. It was great. But even though everything kind of shut down during the pandemic and we all worked from home, I was still highly involved with my office and the things that we got to work on. And so these are just some highlights and assortment of the things that we had addressed. One of the, as you know, there was the murder hornets that came. And so the Natural Resources Committee and the subcommittee I worked for, we dealt with fish and wildlife. We worked with NOAA and fisheries and coral reef program. And so there was a whole slew of terrestrial to marine freshwater that I got to work in. And so, yes, we dealt with the murder hornets. We dealt with invasive species. I got to work on coral reefs, which is my expertise. And we also worked on ocean-based climate solutions. So how do we harness what the ocean is already providing for us? How do we protect it and create policy to ensure that the ocean is healthy and therefore we as a society and planet are healthy? So there's just a photo of getting to go to the floor and actually seeing some of the bills that we worked on get passed. Next slide. And so this is an example of one of the bills that I got to work on. It is not yet passed, but it is the Restoring Resilience Reefs Act. It is the bill right now. And within this bill, I got to work with the Senate side and our representatives in the committee. I got to actually dedicate 2 funding sources, 2 fellowships within it to 2 incredible scientists that I had the pleasure of working with. One was Dr. Susan Williams at UC Davis. She was the former director of the Bodega Marine Lab, and Dr. Ruth Gates, who is a pioneer in coral biology and coral reef ecology, and was the director of the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology. And unfortunately, both of them had passed away too soon in 2018. And so it was a really amazing way and opportunity to put into a bill their names and to put it into law. So I'm really excited and I hope that this gets passed soon. So that was quite an honor to be able to work on that and to have representatives and staffers behind it 100%. The other activities that I got to do was prepare statements, opening remarks for members for our committees, to conduct legislative hearings and prepare staffers with questions as well, so that when they had witnesses come and testify on a topic, whether it was invasive species or fisheries, the Ocean-Based Climate Solutions Act, like how can the ocean help us in our fight against the anthropogenic impacts of climate change. And it was really amazing to be able to articulate and communicate the science very clearly to our members and to their constituents and making it relevant to them. It was an experience I'd never had before. I had no marine policy experience prior. I had been trained as an academic scientist. I loved communication. I loved community engagement. And this was really awesome opportunity to fill in that gap, to actually work for Congress, which I don't think I would have an opportunity if it wasn't for Knauss. So I'm very grateful for that. All right, and next slide. And so these are just previews of what life is like in DC. There's my cohort at the top. We were all legislative fellows. Below is my office that I enjoyed for a month and a half. And then to the left is Rock Creek Park with another former fellow, Mara Howe, and our dogs walking and exploring. Next slide. And then these are just some other highlights of being able to take advantage of my time there. It was highly limited. 2020 was an extremely active year, though, in terms of citizens, of community members being engaged through Black Lives Matter, through protests, through all of the events that happened with the election, the passing of John Lewis and Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and these were just moments in history that were happening. They're actively happening now, and it was an experience to be in DC during all of these events. So that is what I have to share, and happy to answer questions about the Legislative Fellowship.
All right, thank you so much to all three of our panelists. We're going to open it up for that. Questions right now. If you have any, you can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat, and we will definitely get to them. I know off the top of my head, I just wanted to start with this. Ladies, you mentioned earlier that there's an increase in the stipend Now, that is definitely something that I'm sure I saw Lauren's eyes light up, and I'm sure that a whole lot of people are thinking, you know, a full year living out there in the beautiful capital, it's gotta take some money. So, how does the stipend increase go towards bettering the experience, I guess, for fellows moving forward?
I mind taking the first stab at that. Um, my stipend was $47,500 in 2019. And having just been a grad student where I was only getting paid $18,000 a year, that felt like a major increase. Granted, it's DC is a pricey, expensive city, but I was able to live very comfortably. My rent was maybe about $1,100 a month, and utilities are much cheaper in DC than they are in Guam and Hawaii. And Trader Joe's, we don't have a Trader Joe's on Guam, so like I was able to like figure out like how to spend wisely, but I still got to do like a lot of fun things. There's like free museums, but there's also, I was able to like pay to go to concerts, and you know, like I didn't feel like I was struggling, but the increase in the stipend, that's awesome, and I think it's well deserved.
All right, thank you, Lauren. Beth, Maya, you want to lend anything else to that?
Beth,
Go
do you
ahead,
want
Maya.
to talk because you were there recently in 2020?
Yeah, I mean, I think the stipend increase is definitely helpful with cost of living and being able to be in the city, use the metro if that feels safe to you, and take advantage of being there and to travel along the East Coast and getting to see the fall. Like I had never seen leaves like that before in my life. And what's nice is there's the boost in the stipend, but you still have those discretionary funds that Maya spoke about, and it allows you to enhance your professional development still, and to use it to go to places or go to conferences or get training. And it's just such a great fellowship because one, it's valuing your time. It is trying to stay competitive and above and being in the same ranking as the AAAS. Like these are great opportunities after your graduate experience. And they're valuing your time and they're nurturing your network and your career. And they prioritize it with training, and that you can use on your own discretionary funds or they provide it. So yeah, it's definitely a boost, like Lauren said.
So I was a fellow in 2014. The stipend that year was $45,000. And I remember my rent, I thought it was outrageous at the time. My rent in Washington, D.C. was $1,230 a month, and I still made it work. So I think, $66,500 should allow you to live in Washington, D.C. Some of the offices are in Maryland or in Virginia, like right outside of Washington, D.C. And one thing to keep in mind is the $66,500 is meant to cover it's a stipend, but it's meant to cover your monthly salary, so to speak. And then you are expected to pay for your own health insurance. You're not going to get health insurance with the fellowship because you are stipended fellows. So it's just something to keep in mind. And the fellows in past cohorts, they've been able to pay for health insurance, pay for their rent, pay their bills. And then like Beth said, there are $5,000 for allowable expenses. These are for professional development activities, going to conferences. We can also use that money to cover relocation expenses. So if you're moving from Hawaii or Guam to Washington, D.C., and you need to buy plane tickets, ship boxes, if you wanted to move a car, you can use those funds to pay for things like that.
Awesome. My next question was going to be, Beth, you touched a little bit on it with your experience last year, or in 2020, I'm sorry. Is there any news or update in terms of the deliverance of the, the day-to-day work? Are they still working remotely for the most part? Will they be back in real life, so to speak? What do you think
In
about
real
that?
person.
Yeah.
Yeah, so with how things have gone over the last few fellow cohorts, there are some offices that are working in person. It is office by office. So if you are accepted into the fellowship, you go through the process of placement week, you can ask these offices how they are handling it. And then that way you can fine tune to the office you would like to be placed in and the type of fellows that the host offices would like to have and mentor. So there is a mix. There are people who are doing hybrid. There are some that are completely remote. Our current Hawaii fellow has been in Oregon for most of the time and has traveled with some of the discretionary funds to go on a research cruise and to visit other NOAA offices. So they're making the most of it as best they can. And offices are very straightforward of we're staying remote, or yes, we are meeting in person, or we're trying to find ways to come together.
Awesome. And I guess my last question that I've written down while you guys were talking was about the experience. I mean, you know, I see the slides, we see the pictures and the opportunities to take advantage of these great opportunities, right? While you're out there. But more on an islander level, I mean, you're 3 islanders who are out there. There was snow in Maya's picture, which is it's not something we got to deal with all the time. What advice would you give to our fellow islanders as they prepare to possibly embark on this journey?
Get wool everything. Wool socks, wool sweaters, wool hats, wool pants.
Wool it all.
So
Yeah.
I was originally from California. I've been living in Hawaii for about 7 years to 8 now. And I had never been in a 4-season environment before. And just the fact that the season, like you kind of get used to it after the first start of the season is like 2 weeks. And it's like, whew, this is brutal. And then in the 3rd and 4th week, you're like, okay, I can do this. And then 5th and 6th week, it starts to change again. And you're like, what's going on? But I think, you know, some people, it was good for a year, and I'm glad I shoveled out my car twice, and hopefully only twice.
You know how to do it now. I mean, that's another.
I know how to do it. I know how to scrape
resume.
ice off my car.
Might come in handy someday. Very nice. What about you, Maya? What are you thinking?
I agree with Lauren. You should definitely bring warm clothes with you. I will say, you know, for our students who are moving from Hawaii or Guam to Washington, D.C., there is a little bit of an adjustment and a culture difference. Like I remember when I was in DC, I was like, wow, people love to shake hands. Like everyone's shaking hands. In Hawaii, when we see someone that we know or we meet someone new, we give them a hug. So I was like, okay, this is different. We shake hands a lot. And then the other thing I noticed when I moved there was like, people talk really, really fast, and just everyone's walking fast all the time. So there are going to be some adjustments, I think. But the one thing to remember is the cohort of Knauss Fellows, they're always super tight and really supportive of one another. So you're going to have this new family, this new group of friends that's going to support you through this growth experience. And yes, if you are selected, there may be points in the year where you're pushed a little bit outside of your comfort zone, but you're going to learn a lot and you're going to gain so much professionally. So I think it's worth some of the discomfort when it snows and you're cold, or when everyone's talking really fast and walking down the street really fast and you're like, hey, can't we just slow down for a second? I think there's lots of opportunities for growth. So that's really good.
Awesome. And I also wanted to note that as you guys were mentioning, you know, the perspective of an islander now, you know, it's invaluable, right? Not everybody's going to have the opportunity to speak to things the way we have, having lived on an island within this wonderful country. Do you think that you mentioned putting it kind of a reference to the local issues kind of in your interview process? Is that the best place for it to go? Would you suggest infusing our islanderness into any other part of the application? How would it best work out?
This is a great question. So again, the format of the application has changed a lot this year. There are specific questions that they want you to answer. But I think, Kyle, you have a great point. This group of students brings a really unique perspective and a set of experiences to Washington, D.C. that other students don't have. Other students from other programs across the country don't have. So I would think hard about the questions and what kind of story you want to tell in each. I think there is a way to weave it into the answers. And we're happy to answer questions that you have process-wise. And we're also happy to connect you with alumni who can brainstorm with you about what the most successful answer might look like for you and your application package. I'm curious what Beth and Lauren have to say about how this perspective might get woven into the application materials.
I mean, the application process is different because they are doing these prompt specific questions for you to answer. So definitely bring yourself forward, highlight the activities that you've been doing, to highlight the impacts, the communities that you're working with, the universities, highlight the work that you're doing where you are and emphasize the place space. I think that's very important. And I'll let Lauren go for sure. And then I saw Sarah has her hand up too.
Yeah.
Thanks, Beth. I would say that I definitely, in my application, put my Islander perspective and sort of my Islander compass in there in my personal statement. And that's back when we had to write like a 3-page long statement on where we saw ourselves and why we would be interested in the Knauss Fellowship. So I definitely put myself in there. And, you know, as a Knauss Fellow, you do help review the Knauss applicants that are applying for your office the following year. And so having been on that side of the application process as well, I think what really stands out is like when a person seems passionate and aware of just sort of like how they can participate in this realm, maybe even if they don't have experience in it, but how they can use that in their future work and how they could help make a difference. So I think being passionate and like knowing like your personal compass, whether it's like Islander based or non-Islander based, whatever it is that's directing you, that's what's gonna really make your application rise to the top.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Lauren. And yes, we see Sarah's hand up. Go ahead, Sarah.
Hi, everybody. Thank you all for your insight in putting this together today. My question might be a little bit technical, but because there's a new setup for how the prompts are given and headers are counted in our word count, I guess I'm wondering what's an appropriate way to structure the actual application itself. Is it, so there's, for instance, in one of the personal experiences section, there's like 3 questions. Would it be sufficient to just put question 1 as a header and then respond, and then put question 2 and then respond, rather than having to rewrite the whole question and waste that word count on presenting the prompt as well? Just wondering some feedback on that.
This is a great question, Sarah. So I'm noticing in the guidance, it says section 2 can be completed as one continuous statement or as separate responses. And there's 3 separate prompts with 3 separate word caps, maximum word caps. I think, you know, we're going to learn a lot about what style and format the reviewers respond best to. But in this case, use your best judgment. Like if you have some sort of way that you like to organize your writing with subheaders, or certain things are bolded or certain things are italicized, or if you feel that you want to have one continuous response that's not broken up into sections, use your best judgment, and we trust that you're going to put a really good story together, a response together.
Okay, yeah. I was just wondering if there was any, I know this is the first time that we're putting together this particular type of application. So thank you for that. I will use the creative freedom.
Maybe next year, Sarah, you can join us and tell us about your experience as a Knauss Fellow after this new application. Okay, you'll be on the panel next year. Thank you very much.
I hope so.
There you go, girl.
Thank you.
All right, if there are no other questions right now, are there? I don't see any more hands up. It looks like we'll be able to kind of move forward. Just to let you guys know, again, we will be sending out another email to follow up to this. It'll include the video link so you can watch back if there are any other questions that you have that you want a clarification on. We'll also send out the email addresses for all of our panelists, along with important information for your process here to get started with the Knauss Fellowship. Ladies, I'll give it back to you one more time. Is there anything else you'd like to throw out there?
We'd love to see applications from all of you, and we would love to see the second, the third, the fourth Knauss Fellow from Guam. So we really encourage you guys to put things together and to get those applications in by February 18th.
Awesome, great to hear. Now, before we depart, I'd like to ask everybody to turn on their cameras. Can we take a group picture real quick? Yeah, is everybody comfortable with that? Turn them on. Thank you so much, Kelly. Sarah's back. Anania, thank you so much. Lawrence is here. Grace, thank you. Sequoia, you want to jump back on here?
She had to go.
Oh, she had to go. Okay. Oh, okay, there's Kelly. Is it pronounced Miracli? Miracli, thank you so much, Miracli. And Igor, that's a good shot, my man. Let's turn on your camera. Unless you're at the ocean still. Okay? Everybody smile. There's Igor. Okay. Lots sunnier in your pic. There, that's a good shot, bro. Here we go. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Lawrence, are you getting that picture? Okay, one more time. Ready? 3, 2, 1. I'm actually being able to count without moving my mouth. Very good. All right. Well, on behalf of everybody here at the University of Hawaii and the University of Guam Sea Grant programs, we thank you so much for your interest, and we wish you the best of luck, and we hope to hear from you. As all of our presenters had mentioned, you're not in this alone. So if you have any questions, please feel free to contact any members of our teams, and we'll be able to gladly assist in any way that we can so that we can get you in Washington and on a panel next year for this very info session. If there's no other thoughts or concerns, thank you so much. Have a great evening if you're in Hawaii, and a great morning if you're here on Guam. Thank you so much, and we'll see you soon.